When it comes to personal development, no matter the method you use, the vital point is to practice. If you're ready to transform your life and live with clarity, purpose, and wholeness, then you're in the right place. Welcome back to The Vital Point. I'm your host, Jonathan Schechter. I'm a breathwork facilitator and integration coach. The goal of this show is to inspire you to take action for yourself, whether you're taking the first step on your journey of healing and self-discovery, or you're already a seasoned traveler. The truth is, you have the capacity to evolve and bring your intentions and dreams into the world, and there's never been more access to so many incredible modalities that can help you on your journey. This podcast will help you learn simple methods you can use to change your life with guided practices and interviews with practitioners who are doing the work. I want you to feel confident and inspired to take the next step on your own pathway to integration and wholeness. So take a deep breath and let's drop in. So I have a fantastic episode for you today. My guest is the author of The Language of Breath, Jesse Coomer. He is a breathwork coach, cold plunge enthusiast, founder of the School of Breath and the Breathwork Tactics program. He's very active on YouTube and just a great guy. And this book that he wrote, The Language of Breath, is one of my favorite books that I've read about breathwork, and not just breathwork, but really talks about the nervous system, talks about trauma, even though he doesn't really mention the word trauma as much. But a lot of the things that I read in the book reminded me of the things that I have been studying in somatic experiencing. And so I was really, really excited to have this interview with Jesse. Now, full disclosure, we recorded this episode over a year ago. And if you listen to the last episode, I share a little bit about why there was that pause. And one of the things was, man, this episode had so many technical difficulties. I so appreciate the patience of Jesse. You know, he had a smile on his face the whole time in the midst of really annoying technical issues. And then it took me a while to edit through those and make this episode into what it is here for you. So I really love the way that he teaches about breathwork in this book. When I started to read it, it was really interesting because there were things that I was already teaching in my own groups and with my own clients that I've had this experience before. It's one of the reasons that I ended up doing the meditation training with David Nichtern is there's things that I've learned and sort of cobbled together from my own experience. And then I'll have these moments where I'm reading or experiencing the same thing from a book or from a podcast or a meditation. And I'm sitting there listening going, this is exactly what I'm already doing, but it's being said in a way that's more articulate and clearer. And so what can I learn and what can I pull into my own approach? And The Language of Breath was one of those. You know, he describes the connection between the body and the mind and the conscious and the unconscious, and this bridge that is the breath between this conscious and unconscious as a language, and that the body is always speaking to us through this language. We just don't usually listen until, you know, oftentimes it's screaming at us. And that just like learning a language, when you first start to learn it, you're not going to speak it very fluently, like that there's a learning process. And this is something that I talk to clients about often, because often I'm sharing somatic experiencing or somatic skills and meditations with them for the first time. And when I start to talk about slowing down and orienting more, both externally and inside the body, and finding comfort, finding joy, finding moments that are a little less uncomfortable than maybe your average experience, and developing that felt sense and that felt experience. Oftentimes they look at me like I'm speaking in a foreign language. So this metaphor feels really potent for me, and I was just so excited to touch base with Jesse. And again, I appreciate his patience. Before we jump into the episode, I want to share a really important project that we launched recently. It's a nexus point where the paths of integration converge, and that's the Blue Magic Alchemy Collective that's on the School platform. It's the hub of all my work. There's really all the things that you need for this integrative journey all in one place. There's a calendar to stay connected and sign up for live breathwork and other integrative workshops and events. There's a message board so that you can interact with other alchemists and practitioners and share your wins, feel supported. And there's a section, they call it the classroom because it's SKOOL, where I post guided meditations, breathwork, and other integrative practices. So it's really this place where I'm gathering all my recorded material and continuing to record new stuff. And there's a whole slew of things that I have planned. So the great news is that you can come and enjoy them live. And if you're listening to this at some point in the future and, some of the live events have already passed, come to the site anyway, because everything's getting recorded and posted up there eventually. So I want to mention, if you're listening to this during the first couple of weeks that it's out, there's a live open house event that we're doing with workshops and giveaways. There's a group meditation challenge that we're starting, and that's going to lead into a live meditation and microdosing course that's going to be available on the site. So I'd love for you to join us there live, and you can find that community at school.com/Blue Magic Alchemy. You could also search for Blue Magic Alchemy on the school site, or just go to any one of my socials. It'll be on this about page for the podcast, as well as all of my social linky poos with the link to the school site. So again, that's school.com/Blue Magic Alchemy. And you can join for free there. We'd love to see you. So now, without further ado, let's jump into this interview with Jesse Coomer, author of The Language of Breath. Okay, welcome back to the Vital Point podcast. My guest today is Jesse Coomer. He's the author of The Language of Breath, one of my favorite books from 2023, and I'm still really enjoying it. And Jesse, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, really appreciate you being here. You graciously offered to lead a little practice, and I could definitely use it on a day like today. I was having some technical difficulties, so good to
absolutely
have the chance to settle a little bit.
Absolutely. We'll start it. We'll start it with some good feelings. Let's just start off when we close our eyes. So just go ahead and close your eyes. And unless you're driving and listening to the podcast, then please keep them open. But do your best to start to become more aware of yourself. When we close our eyes, we close out about 10 million pieces of information, which makes it a little bit easier for us to become more inwardly aware. And start to become aware of your breath, tracing your inhale in through your nostrils, feeling the cooler air, almost as if you're inhaling maybe a molecule of awareness as it enters in through your sinuses, tracing it down your throat, down to your bronchi, your bronchioli, your alveoli, all the way down. And then just right back out again. And just become aware of how this process, when we put conscious awareness to it, how it affects us in subtle ways. Often we are so outwardly focused. We're just going to start with a little bit of inward focus. Just tracing the breath in and out to begin with. Just observing, not judging, not expecting anything, just breathing. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take a nice deep breath in, nice, slow, full deep breath in. But as you do, I want you to pull your awareness from your feet. So start with awareness in your feet. And as you inhale, pull your awareness from your feet all the way up to your head. Nice and slow. Until you have absolutely full lungs, and just putting your awareness in your head, maybe even on your face. And with full lungs, go ahead and smile and just observe the subtle changes that occur with that small action. Often we overlook these things. Hold your breath with full lungs just for a moment. Smile and let it go with a nice sound like this. Allowing your awareness to come right back down to your feet as you empty your lungs. We're going to do this again. Taking a deep breath in, pulling your awareness from your feet all the way up to your head. And if you notice that it's difficult to focus in on a part of your body as you go up, that's okay. Just try to slow down in that area as you slow the breath, marrying your awareness to your breath until you fill your lungs with your full awareness up in your head, holding your breath. Smile and let it go with a sound, any sound you like. Letting that awareness come right back down to your feet. We're going to go a little bit faster. See how fast you can inhale while still being aware, pulling that awareness, not skipping any places. So some people will be fast, others slow. Pulling that awareness up to your head, holding your breath, smiling, and then letting it go with the sound and just lengthening that exhale as long as you can. One more time, deep breath in, pulling it up from the feet all the way up to the head. Hold with full lungs. Awareness in your head, full awareness there. Smile. And let it go with any sound you like. Now go back into normal breathing and just take a few moments to observe how you feel. Just acknowledge the subtle changes that occur with just a little bit of conscious breathing. We didn't really even do that much. Just a little bit of conscious breathing, bringing us back into ourselves, bringing us back into the moment. And when you're ready, you can open up your eyes.
Thank you so much. I feel much better.
Sometimes we got to do those on those days when tech is just not working with us.
Yeah. And it's still not working, but we're going to roll with it. So, So let's talk about the language of breath. How did you develop that system?
So the language of breath is a complete philosophy of breath work and self-awareness that it was one of those things where I slowly but surely started to realize that breathing techniques were not magical codes. And breathing techniques are not codes for a robot self, right? So I think a lot of times we look at things as, well, if you put this input into your device, this is the output that you can expect. And we look at ourselves a lot like machines in this way. And we even compare ourselves to machines. Like, people call me a burrito eating machine. And while that is, I don't even know if it's meant to be a compliment. It's just, it's just the fact that we see ourselves very mechanistically when we are not. We are organisms, and we often forget a lot of the underlying and underpinning aspects of what it is to be a human being. One is that we are organisms that are designed around taking actions. So when it comes down to it, and this is stuff that I wish people would have just told. I don't know if I would have listened when I was younger, but I'd like to think that maybe I would have. But I think a lot of us go through life really unaware that to be a human is to be an organism of action, in that every cell within us, so from head to toe, all of our cells are working together, 37.2 trillion cells working together to take actions to sustain life. We see life often as this thing, but it's really an event that all of our cells are working to try to make sure that it lasts as long as possible. And this is where we get our stress response. This is where we get our anxieties, where we get our relaxation, where we get all of the sensations, all of the things that make up our human experience. And so what I was noticing, I kept on learning different techniques. I started the whole breathwork journey to try to handle my own anxiety. And what I learned what anxiety was. I learned how breathing interfaces with our nervous system and our unconscious processes. And ultimately, I was like, well, wait a minute. It's not just this one technique or this other technique. Ultimately, it's all of these techniques, all of these things that we see out there when it comes to breath work. And there's a lot of them that I studied under a lot of people, did a lot of certifications, did a lot of research and experimentation. And over the years, I was like, what we're doing is actually, this is a method of self-communication. And I started to put together this framework is that, okay, there's a conscious part of me, and then there's the vast majority of me is unconscious. And that word itself, I think a lot of people have a lot of problems with. Unconscious is also another word we would use if you passed out or if you're asleep, and that's not what that is. There are processes that occur within us that we have no conscious awareness of or no conscious control of. However, when that unconscious part of you wants you to be aware, and ultimately this comes down to helping you to take actions to survive or thrive, what happens is that it will make you aware of certain sensations. It's going to affect how you think. It's going to affect the decision-making process. It'll affect your physiology. It tries to put you into a situation where you're more likely to survive. And so I started just realizing, well, all of this is a language. This is a way of self-communication. And with language, and just for those who are listening, I am a recovering English professor. And so this is something that I was like, well, wait a minute. What we're doing here is we're parsing out language. And the thing about language is that, a lot of times we would say, hey, I can speak to my friends and things like that. We don't have conscious access. We don't have direct access to what's happening inside of another person. All we can do is basically we can try to decide what it is they're trying to say based off of their actions, their physical expressions, the words that they're giving us, and then try our best to do the same thing back. We don't have direct access. And in many ways, that's exactly how it is with our conscious and our unconscious. We don't have direct access to our unconscious. We can't just say, hey, we need to calm down, or hey, I'm safe. We have to learn how to send those signals in a way that that unconscious part of us will infer a meaning and take action to make whatever changes that the team needs. And we also have to, and this is the thing that I think is the most important part, we have to learn how to infer meaning from our unconscious, which is not going to speak to us in English or Spanish or any given language. It speaks to us in sensations, in gut feelings, in changes in our physiology, there are ways that we can start to infer what the unconscious is trying to tell us. It's just that we have to become more aware. So the language of breath is ultimately, it is a system of using breathwork techniques. So all of everybody's favorite styles, whether it's hyperventilation or whether it's slow breathing, CO2 focused breathing, breathing techniques for the moment, breath mechanics, all of those things are a part of this complex language that once we look at it holistically, we can start to use these. You can use your breath as a way to speak to the unconscious, and then you use your awareness as a way to decipher, first of all, did my unconscious receive the signal that I was trying to send? And how do I really feel? And it's so funny, we don't have a lot of even words to describe exactly how we feel. We have quite a few adjectives. Sadly enough, most of them are negative. We have great, good, but so many more descriptive words for negative emotions and negative feelings. But even then, how do I use that information? And do I really even need to label it? Okay, I'm feeling this way. Okay, my unconscious must think that I'm in danger somehow, or my unconscious is trying to help me to survive. Thank you, unconscious me. But I need to inform you that we're just fine. We're not running from a bear, or I need to get some sleep right now because I know you're trying to give me energy, but it's 3 a.m. and I need to get some sleep because tomorrow I have that thing that I need to do. So it was a course of a deep dive, deep learning into multiple modalities, and just noticing that they're all working with the same things, and learning to, over years of clients' research, putting it all together in a way that a person can apply to their own lives.
Yeah, I really appreciate the language of breath, the way that you describe things. As I started to read the book, I felt there were so many things that were parts of things that I teach or share with clients, but you were saying it in a very succinct, like easy to digest way. And it actually helped me get clarity around some of the things that I've been trying to teach. Just using that metaphor of the breath. For instance, oftentimes with somatic awareness, people are really puzzled by that, or it's almost, and even before I read the book, I would say like, it's like learning a new language, so reading your book just gave me so much more, in being able to go more in depth with the metaphor and help people to understand, just like you say in the book, like you can't expect to pick up a new language and speak it very fluently or understand exactly what's happening when somebody's speaking to you. And that is a very relatable, metaphor, right? Like you might put the emphasis on the wrong syllable as you begin to speak. And, another thing that I always share with people is like that how the breath can be the remote control for the nervous system. And that's a different way of saying we're speaking and communicating with that unconscious, right? And I'll say, like, we kind of understand that intuitively. Like everybody's heard something like, take a deep breath and relax, but your mileage may vary with that. Taking a deep breath might not be relaxing for you. And again, that's another like really relatable thing. So it's like getting to know these principles of the language rather than focusing on this modality or that modality. This one's great, this one's not. I like this one. This is the first one that I learned. And really getting to know those principles so that you can start speaking that language.
Absolutely. And a lot of people, in my early years of training people with breath, they had never heard of breath work before. It was something that just nobody really knew what it was. And there was a lot of misunderstanding and misconceptions as far as what it was. Nowadays, the vast majority of my clients are people who have heard of breath work. They've tried XYZ, then this and that. and they're a lot of times they're kind of frustrated. I do this breathing technique, and according to the research that was done on it, I should be carefree by now. What's going on? And there's so much more complexity to it. In fact, I train a lot of different people from first responders to athletes and things of that nature. And sometimes I will talk to other people in other modalities. For instance, I was having a conversation with some physical therapists, and they just give us some simple tips and tricks. Give us a technique and tell me what the technique will do. And I know that there's a lot of talk about it's one simple trick and this will cure your anxiety and things like that. And so what I asked them, I said, I'd be happy to do that for you, but let me just ask you a real quick question. I have some pain in my shoulder. What should I do? And of course, they realized, that's a huge simplification. Hey, would you give me a stretch for my shoulder so that I can heal my shoulder? And we look at so often we look at breath work that way. Because on the surface it's incredibly simple, right? Okay, I just breathe in for this much. I hold my breath. I let go. The thing that we started our session with is incredibly simple. Well, okay, we just kind of did a few things. But when you want to build a practice or just have a life that is more manageable, is something where I talk about the team that is you, right? No matter what you do, you will never escape the fact that part of you you have conscious access to a very small part of you, very small part. The vast majority of you is unconscious, and you have to work within that frame. That's what it is to be a human. You have a conscious and an unconscious. There's a relationship between those two aspects of you, and in those two aspects of you are in relationship to the world around you. And the way you consciously respond to something is always going to be influenced by the way you unconsciously respond to something. And there's always all these relationships. And then we say, okay, what is a simple trick so that I don't have any anxiety anymore? It's like you're not appreciating the complexity. And so and complexity doesn't sell, sadly enough, right? It's not like, hey, this is a real complex thing. It's going to take a long time for you to figure it out. You want to try it? Well, this guy over here says it's one simple trick. You just do this in, out, hold, and whatever. But at the end of the day, the vast majority of my clients, they've tried the simple clickbait type things. And they say, well, I did feel something. I don't even know what it was that I felt, but I felt better after I did this for a while. I don't feel like my health has actually changed. I don't feel like my psychology has actually changed in any major way. But I thought I was supposed to be carefree at this point, or this or that. So when we look at ourselves holistically and we look at ourselves more accurately, then we can start to, first of all, manage expectations, right? So there's some kinds of, there's some people who are, hey, you do this breathing technique, you'll never get sick again. Or this one's been shown to lower your blood pressure, or, all these things. And so people just look at the technique and they say, okay, well, this is a code for my machine and all that other stuff. When in reality, you have to think, okay, so there's a conscious and unconscious you. There's your environment that influences all of this as well. It's not like you can just say, like there's no pill in the world that does that. There's no, but somehow this breathing technique is going to do that. And it has, studies and all this stuff. Well, that's great. But if you understand the underpinnings, okay, there's a part of me that's trying to help me as much as it drives me crazy, right? It won't let me stop thinking about my worries. Well, and then oftentimes we're like, man, there's really something wrong with me, or we'll figure out ways to ignore or cover up those sensations or those thoughts. And this thing of rumination, I think, of course, since humans have been humans, I mean, you look back in the ancient texts, everyone's been dealing with rumination. It's part of being a human being. It's not just modern humans that have had this. We have more inputs with information, which causes us to have more reasons to ruminate maybe, but everyone is worried about what's going to happen next season. Everyone is worried about what is going to happen tomorrow because we're unsure. And everyone can relate to a sleepless night, whether it's because you're worried or maybe it's because you're excited, right? You know, the little kids, when I was a little kid and we knew Santa was coming that night, I was so excited I couldn't sleep. Well, there was a part of me that was trying to say, well, let's get up, let's do the thing, let's solve the problem. And it doesn't understand time. It doesn't understand, well, we don't need the energy until tomorrow, right? So it's like, hey, think about this thing. It's sending me dopamine so that it encourages me to continue to figure it out. And so there's a lot of things where we just have to manage our team when we have to say, okay, this is what it is to be a human being. And the conscious and the unconscious are fantastic. The capabilities are fantastic. We want this team. This is a great team. It's got us hundreds of thousands of years, right? It's the reason why we're standing here talking today. But there's times whenever, especially if you're not even aware that you have a team, and that was me most of my life. It's like, what? You mean there's part of me that's thinking, and it's not just a part of me. The vast majority of me is not something I can consciously control or even become aware of. What are you talking? Once you're aware of that, first of all, you realize, or at least the way I look at my reactions, the way I look at stress, the way I look at anxiety completely changes. And this is how it works for my clients. Because I often give the example, I love to drink coffee in the morning. I'm not one of these breath workers that tries to convince everyone that I don't drink coffee or, enjoy caffeine or whatever. And so in the morning, I'll have a cup of coffee and I'll get that morning boost. Can you imagine getting the caffeine, energy without drinking coffee? Like just some random part of the day, suddenly you feel all that energy, right? It would kind of freak people out, right? If I don't know where it's coming from. And that's the experience that most people have with their unconscious. The unconscious says we need to energize because our species solves all of its problems through taking action. So here's a bunch of energy, Jesse. And then here I am sitting and maybe it's a chemistry test, or maybe it's I found out some bad news, or maybe I have to solve some kind of a problem at work. And now I have all this energy for physical actions, which does not actually help me. And then it kind of freaks me out. And when it freaks me out, I might change my breathing pattern. And when I do that, I send a message back to my unconscious that, hey, we got to get up and go. It's time to freak out even more. And it can set off these chain reactions that I don't even know I'm doing. And so what I try to do in the book, and what I do with my online course, what my breath workers do who train with me and certify with me, we spend a lot of time explaining to humans what a human is. And then once we get a certain framework, okay, you are an unconscious and a conscious being within a relationship with each other, and that is in with relationship to everything else that is around you. Once we have a basic framework, then we can start saying, okay, now let's check out your breathing. Let's see what messages you're sending. Let's see what tone and inflection. The emphasis on the wrong syllable is exactly right. How you breathe a breathing technique affects how the breathing technique will work. Just like how you emphasize or how you use tone and inflection in your voice, like the music of our voice, those affect the meaning of what we have to say as well. And so in the book, I give the example of, the classic phrase, I love you, right? And if anyone's who've ever been in a romantic relationship, the first time you're going to come out with that is like, that's kind of a big deal. Right. That's, unless you're just the kind of person who goes around, hey, I love you, right? But like, that's kind of a big deal. And so you kind of really want to lean into, I'm sure there's some of us who've been unfortunate enough to say, say it in an awkward way. And it's like, oh man, it totally ruined the moment, hopefully a person didn't just scream it at the top of their lungs, like in a I don't know, like a caveman kind of way. So how you say something, it changes its meaning. And it's also how you breathe something. So, okay, now we understand what a human is. Now let's talk about how your tone and inflection work when it comes to your breathing. And okay, now great. Now let's learn some phrases in this language of breath. Okay, great. Now let's learn how to see, did what I say, is what I'm saying landing? Right? And this is why when I do podcasts, I'm so happy that I can see your face right now, right? So it might just be on an audio format for some people who are listening, but I can see your face. I know if something's landing. I know if you're understanding me. And that kind of feedback we can get from our unconscious if we know what to look for. And so there's a lot of different ways we teach, and I cover most of those in the book. And it's a matter of saying, okay, now the team is cooperating. Now, that unconscious me, it will be stubborn sometimes. It's going to want to change how I think about things. It's going to make me blind to certain things because it's ultimately the one that's got the most power. But I've got a lot of capabilities as my conscious me. So I understand my values, I understand where we want to go tomorrow. I understand I can really examine and say, we're really not in a dangerous situation. So I can send that message back. And then before you know it, I want people to start to see themselves as a relationship, because when we look at ourselves as a machine operator, and you know, that's how we often look at ourselves. I am this operator of the machine, right? Well, when you look at yourself like that, you're all by yourself. And man, you better have absolute control. And you better never go to sleep. And you better never take your focus away from controlling every little bit of yourself. But if you look at yourself like a relationship and you say, okay, I understand that my unconscious has certain patterns it's picked up, probably some of these things that I unwittingly allowed it to get in the habit of doing, or maybe my experiences, or maybe my situations. You know, a lot of these things are not in our control at first, but they are things that, man, it's just not serving me. Well, now I can start to work with that part of myself as I slowly but surely retrain that part of myself, and we can start to move forward together as a team, as opposed to me having to white knuckle everything I ever do. Because let me tell you, just for everyone who's listening, you have a certain amount of conscious control over yourself. We call that willpower, but you have a limited amount. And when you're trying to live a happier, healthier life, I think we all know that you have to convince the unconscious part of you to come along, because you can only white knuckle things for so long. So when we use this breath as a language, awareness as a way of understanding, we can start to build that better team and make better decisions and live a better life.
So well said. I mean, there's so much there, like to go into, or to like, I feel like we could just stay right there. But also I'm just curious to maybe dive a little bit deeper. So what are some of the things that people can do in the beginning to start building that team, start to get in a more cohesive relationship with their unconscious?
That's a great question. And one of the first exercises in the book is an exercise that I call the smiling back exercise. And it's not even breath work, okay? Because what I believe in, and my clients here, my students at the Breathworker School hear all the time, and we even have like tenets, you know, because I'm like, okay, and as funny as that might sound, or as funny as it was whenever I was like, here are the tenets of the language of breath, but it's important to sometimes have guidelines, so that we just have some things to fall back on to remind us. So the very first rule is that awareness is the foundation of all positive change. And so when we can become aware of that team, we can start, first of all, we can start forgiving ourselves for reacting in certain ways. We can say, because so often we just feel like, man, there's something wrong with me, right? And I know that's how it was for me. I had incredible anxiety in social situations, but at the same time, I felt like I was being left out, and I needed to be in social situations too. I was a very social person, and I still am. And so it was this thing that had me in a lurch, and it caused me to go down all kinds of bad paths, trying to make that part of me that was that anxiety part of me, trying to make it shut up. So just what I like to do, and we'll just do a quick version of that exercise. So for those of you who are listening, if you're driving, keep your eyes open, but otherwise just close your eyes and just envision your own smiling face, smiling right back at you. I'd like to introduce you to the unconscious you. And that unconscious you is saying, hello, conscious me. I appreciate the fact that you can do critical thinking. You can think of the future. You can think about the past. You're very capable of rational thought. I'm on your team. You have the front of the store. I've got the back of the store. I'm always going to be watching. Even whenever you're asleep, I'm going to be watching. I'll be listening. I'm going to be observing the whole world that we're in. I'll be looking for points of danger and opportunity. And just see yourself smiling back, saying that to you. There is this other part of you that we have to meet. Thank you, unconscious me. Thank you for always trying to help me to survive and thrive. Thank you for pumping my heart and changing my hormones, doing all the things to maintain this life that we have. And then just understand that other part of you, that is you. That's just as much, if not more, you than the conscious you that's deciding either to do this exercise or not. And then you can open up your eyes. But basically, it's important to visualize, I think. It really to recognize this change. And in the book, being that I come from a language background, I even invented a new word to try to describe this team. Instead of the mind and the body we really have worked really hard to try to combine these things. I use the word philia, as it is a Greek root word for brotherly love, or just the closest relationship, the closest non-romantic relationship you can have, a brotherhood, a sisterhood, that family kind of atmosphere. And because what we have here is a dual experience that seems like a singular experience. And when we can start to see ourselves like that, we can start to say, you know what just happened there? Oh, interesting. I'm starting to pick up on that was my unconscious trying to protect me there. Like, for instance, here's one we can all relate to. So the unconscious you is very concerned with territory. We're territorial creatures. And so the unconscious you is going to, for instance, this is what normally happens in relationships, but also other times, whenever you think someone's kind of slighted you, they didn't give you full credit, it will do everything it can to try to make you take actions to preserve your territory. And this is very typical in like relationships where it's like, well, I've been doing the dishes more than you, and right? And in reality, the hope is that you have a good relationship with your partner. But and when you later on, when you look, why did I go off on that stupid little thing? Well, that was not a rational choice, right? The conscious thinking part of you that you have access to, that's where you keep rational thinking. That's generally where that's where that happens. The rest of you, so about 95% of you, okay, that's how much unconscious you are, is saying someone's coming in on my turf and I need to protect myself, and I'm going to change my physiology. I'm going to change my all these. We're going to make changes in our physical and psychological expressions to put me on the defensive and to make me feel a certain way. And it's so sad. But when you start to recognize, oh, that's what that is, and you start to say, okay, I should, while emotions are much faster than critical thinking, while the unconscious you is instant, like it can process millions of pieces of information like pretty much instantly. This is the part of you, whenever people compare your brain to a supercomputer, that's the part of you that it is doing. So you take in about 11 million pieces of information every second of every day. You can only consciously process about 40. Right? The rest of you is unconscious, and it's like, boom, it's real fast. It's much faster. So that it's processing that, 10 million odd pieces of information almost instantaneously. Whereas for that 40 to 50, maybe 50 pieces of information that you can do consciously, like we all know how slow that is, right? We all know how it's, okay, so let's see. Well, next Tuesday is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days away. And I need to do, right? We all understand that's critical thinking, and critical thinking is something we can do consciously. Unconscious you is capable of putting millions of pieces from all parts of your life all together in one quick reaction. And so it's faster than the conscious part of you. So we have to say, okay, the way I feel, the way I'm reacting, it's something that I need to be aware of. And maybe I need to cool off a little bit. Maybe the fact that I feel like I've done the dishes more times than my partner's done the dishes. Maybe that's not the be all end all of my life. And I need to think more about, but how much of our lives do we ruminate later on in the day? So it's you did, mine did. Tell me about it. Like we ruin so much of our life on that. And that's natural. We've been doing it since humans have been humans. But maybe we can start to say, okay, I need to do something to interrupt that process. To say, hey, listen, we're safe. Our territory is not being infringed on. Our territory is safe. I don't need to be ruminating about this all day because it's going to ruin my day, ruin my relationship with my partner, and it's probably going to ruin whatever project I'm trying to work on because I'm going to be distracted. So we can start to breathe back information and relax or interrupt these processes. And so it's a matter of learning to respond and become aware of those processes. And this is part of the language of breath practice. There's a lot of it that's breathing, but just as much, if not more of it, is learning that internal awareness and becoming more in touch with the feelings, the sensations, the physiological changes that come along with the unconscious saying, hey, we need to take action. And so when you learn these two things, you can start to interface with yourself and you can start to be a whole person. And instead of constantly having to white knuckle it and say, hey, unconscious me, we're going this way no matter what I want, because it is you, then you can start to actually make major changes and over time retrain yourself and live more in alignment with your values.
Yeah, and without those sort of understanding that connection between the conscious and unconscious, without that language, whatever things that are happening, you're sort of guessing, was that the thing that did it for me? Was it what I ate? Was it what talking to that person? I mean, I had that yesterday. It was funny. Like I wear, a Whoop strap. And I've been exercising more and I've been noticing my heart rate variability going up and my sleep getting better. And then last night, I thought I didn't really feel like I slept any different, like a sort of par. But when I got up this morning and I looked at the data, I'm like, oh, wait, scores are a little lower. Well, what is that? Was it because I didn't go to the gym yesterday? I ate some sugar that I've been kind of staying away from. I was dealing with some different people, some different activities, and I'm starting to look for that pattern or that root cause of what created that, right? So I think that's one way that being able to speak that language and have that interface, a better connection with my unconscious, helps me. Is I start to be able to decipher and understand those signals and the things that are happening inside of me a little bit better, rather than just trying to guess, what made me less anxious in this scenario, or more anxious too, right?
Yeah, and even then, a lot of times we just chalk it up to, well, there's something wrong with me, or or, whenever in reality life is a really complex thing. There's so many things that interface with, and we're constantly in relationship to. So it's one of those things where just becoming more aware is so foundational. And sometimes it's a matter of, sometimes it's a matter of it matters why, and then other times it's just a matter of it doesn't even matter why, right?
Yeah.
And so so much of our lives, we could, and actually, that's an interesting thing. Our unconscious. So this is one of the things the unconscious naturally makes us want to do is solve that riddle of why did it happen. Mm-hmm. And so that's what
sometimes it's just feel it, just be with it.
Right. And so what we'll do is sometimes we'll be like, and this is not a bad thing to try to figure out what is the root cause, because like you said, it could have been, man, I really need to change my patterns. This thing is causing me problems. And whenever I move this thing out, I'm going to fix it. So I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but there are some things, and this is something where, sometimes you just don't even know. And so I had a client who actually right at the year, let's see, it was 2021. And I had like a whole slew of clients, and they all happened to be women who were afraid of driving on the highway suddenly. And it was just out of nowhere. Women who were afraid of driving on the highway. And I had a couple of clients who were suddenly afraid of flying on planes. And these, they were like, I just don't even know why. I have no idea why. And the thing is, at the end of the day, it didn't matter why. It just mattered that they needed to be able to drive on the highway. And so what we did is we worked with them, or I worked with them. And what we did is we said, okay, so what we're going to have to do is there's a part of you that's trying to protect you right now. And so we can speak to the conscious part of you that's like, well, the vast majority of people do not die on the highways. There is a rational fear there. The statistics of dying while driving, there is a rational fear there. People do die while driving. Let's think about that. Okay, we'll rationally think about it. Doesn't matter though, right? It didn't matter to these people because they knew there was no rational fear that okay, I'm just driving 60 down the highway. I want to be able to take my grandson to the zoo, and that was one of my clients. Only that was her biggest thing. I want to take my grandson to the zoo, but it's an hour drive on the highway. And so we said, okay, we're going to have to retrain that part of you. We have to teach that part of you that's for some reason is the alarm bells are going off. I need to save us. And so we have to learn to say, hey, we're okay. We're safe. Relax. Okay. It's all right. And even though there might have been something that caused those things to come up, what we were able to do is work on a feeling level, right? And say, all right, what we need to do is understand, first of all, even though it's uncomfortable, that's a part of you that loves you and is trying to help you. So that in itself makes it a little bit less scary. Now, in the moment, it doesn't help a whole lot, but the drive to the on-ramp, is not quite as scary when that's a part of you that's just trying to help you. And all we're going to do is we're going to get that part of you more comfortable. And we're going to speak to that part of you with some breathing techniques, and we're going to just slowly but surely retrain that part of you. And so over time, and it took some time, but she was able to take her grandson to the zoo, and a lot of these clients, all of the clients actually, were able to drive on the highways again. And it's one of those things where just because we've experienced a trauma, even though we may not be completely aware of what's causing these issues. And that's the thing. Most of the time when we have these gut reactions, when we have these visceral reactions, you can, and there's nothing wrong with figuring it out, but at the end of the day, the thing that matters is that you can live your life and go forward and enjoy your life. And so that's when we start to work with that unconscious me. It's not as simple as, up, down, left, right, A, B start or whatever the code was, but it's basically saying, hey, it's all right. It's all right. Just like having a coach with you. Hey, you're okay. Right. You're okay. And you might still be like, I don't know. It's all right. And then you just kind of prove to yourself, maybe I am a person who can go on the highway with those semis and the other cars. And then the team is working together again.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, what you're speaking to, what I hear, and I'm relating it to my own experience, working with clients, is that regardless of how severe, extreme, disorienting the signals and messages that you're getting, those things make sense. And when we explain that to people and we get them to understand that those signals make sense, that there's nothing wrong with them, that takes away so much shame and guilt and, this cycle that might be happening with addiction, because there's this shame and guilt because I don't feel right. And then I'm looking for some way to quiet that down. Yep. And then that's creating this feedback loop. But when I explain the nervous system to people, and you make sense, and like you said earlier, in the show, your system and your unconscious self has worked so well for forever. Like, it's gotten us exactly to this point, and it did the best that it could in that moment. And what a wonderful, beautiful, protective system, rather than this thing that they've been living with of what's wrong with me. And that starts to really shift. I see it in people. I see the light go on and the dots start to connect, and maybe they'll ask something. Oh, well, could this be happening from a car crash? Or could this be, or when you talk to them about the complex trauma, wait, being a parentified child is traumatic, or being bullied constantly at school, or, not being accepted for my sexual orientation, or my race, my culture, all these different things that this psychology is just starting to catch up and saying yeah, actually this does cause trauma, right? All that is just creating those signals and those messages within us that are happening on a very unconscious level a lot of the time.
Exactly. And we all know, the person who always goes after the abusive boyfriend or whatever, or the person who deep down is a really, really good person but can't stay out of jail for drunk driving. And it's so easy to look at, and just say, well, there's you have a terrible character, and there's something, a flaw, and it's all on you. And in reality, our behaviors are informed by the unconscious that's trying to help us and is doing its best. It's not always right. That's the thing. Right. So often in the self-help and the wellness world, we talk about listening to your heart, listening to your gut, and that's only actually something we should do if you have experience in that area. There's a story about if you remember the Segway. Those like two wheels and it has a handle. Well, I remember when it was about to come out, all the news agencies, they were like, this is going to be the greatest invention of all time. Everyone will want two of them. It's going to change the world. And we all have heard of Steve Jobs, right? So Steve Jobs is, just brilliant genius in one area, right? And Steve Jobs was shown the Segway, and he says this is actually one of the reasons why everybody knew just deep down, oh, this is going to be a great success, is because Steve Jobs offered to buy it. He's like, I want to buy this. I want to be a part of this. I want to own this. This is going to be the greatest invention of all time. Now, Steve Jobs was a genius because he had a lot of experience in computers, but he had no experience in the transportation industry. So his gut was not believable. His unconscious was putting together things based off of his skill set, but his unconscious didn't have any idea what to do with the Segway. But even after he couldn't buy it, he's like, well, I want to be on your board. I want to be part of this. And of course, we all know, the only place you'll see a Segway is like the zoo, whenever you can rent one, or occasionally they have police officers that, it's like, well, they have someone made a good sale, But what we have, these gut reactions, sometimes we listen to our heart, and it's telling us the absolute wrong thing to do in that moment. It's your gut is what tells you to punch the person in the face when you shouldn't probably, or sometimes it's your heart that wants you to cheat on your spouse or whatever. And it's like, these things are, yes, there's a part of you that saw that as an opportunity to improve your situation in life, or it's something that you really wanted. But but that's why we have this team, and that's why it's important to make it a team. It's not just one or the other. Rational thinking is fantastic, but you do need to understand what your unconscious has picked up in your life in order to be comfortable. That unconscious has made a pretty good judgment, depending on your experiences, on how the world works. And you'll have some intuitions as far as, okay, this is pretty much how people react. This is how, but if you've been around a lot of liars, you're going to see everybody is, probably going to lie to me. So it's always, this is why it's important to have a good communication with these two parts of yourself, so that you can start to negotiate a better way of looking at the world, understanding that a part of you is it's very fast. It's in control of most of you. And it's going to be very visceral. It's going to punch you in the face and say, cross the street when these people are coming towards you, and you're going to be in danger. So you have to say, okay, this is just a part of me that loves me very much, is trying to help me. And I'm not stuck that way. It's not stuck. I'm not like forever like this. It's just that based off of all my experiences, based off of, this beautiful, wonderful thing that I am, these are the impulses that I'm getting. So once we become more aware of those things, we can start to negotiate. We can start to go into those uncomfortable places, or we can start to say, okay, I'm really uncomfortable being alone, right? It's not that I want to be with abusers. I have these other things that I should work on, and it's going to be uncomfortable for a while. And part of me thinks that I'm probably putting myself in danger, but I need to be comfortable going this new road rather than the old road now. And then over time, that's the beautiful thing. Over time, it does take time, but much of this relationship we can say, okay, you know what? I'm more comfortable now than doing it. And then eventually you would never even think of doing that other activity. One of the things I discussed, I didn't discuss it much in Language of Breath, and I don't discuss it much, but I was an opioid addict for 10 years. And so, you get in that long, you just assume you're never going to get out of it. Now, though, and that's been like 13 years ago, it doesn't, that kind of lifestyle, those decisions, they don't even make sense. It's like, there's never a thought, well, maybe I should go back to that. It's not even a thought. And so whenever I do a lot of talks in drug rehab clinics, and I tell them this because so often it's hard to believe that, because it feels like so hard deep down, right? And right. That's that unconscious. It's seeking safety. Oh, I know I can feel safe. Sadly enough, this is what puts me in that safe place. And I don't know any other way of being safe. This is the way that I found. And it's and so when we know that, hey, listen, you're not stuck, and you've come to some conclusions that have led you to an outcome that is not great for you. I'm going to speak to your conscious reasoning self. Please believe me in your unconscious self, and we're going to take the steps, and before long, you won't even miss it. And I tell people that all the time. They're like, really? And I say, I remember what it was like. I didn't even think I could be the same person, right? I wondered if I would ever, was my sense of humor because I was always high, or was my personality in the drugs? And the reality is that the beauty is that this team, when you work with it in an effective way, you can go and you can do just about anything. It's just, it takes time, and it's going to not always be comfortable. There's going to be a little infighting, but you can do it.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And, to me, it put a couple of pieces together, because one of the things that I was really struck by as I began the book was, as a somatic experiencing practitioner, I'm reading and I'm like, I feel like he's talking about the same stuff that they talk about in somatic experiencing, but he's not using the words trauma. It's not in looking from this frame necessarily of trauma, but he's really talking about the same things. And that to me was so refreshing. And also like I was saying in the beginning, like kind of helped me to integrate some of the ideas, or gave me, inspiration for, oh, okay, yeah, that's a good way to explain that. That's a good way to talk about this. Because let's face it, like most people are coming to somatic experiencing because of trauma, because of the things that, they're at the end of their rope, right? Yep. But at the same time, somatic experiencing is also a way to like experience the world in a more like aligned, holistic, just embodied way, right? It's not just the trauma, it's being able to appreciate the good things. Oh, well, I'm feeling, what happens when somebody gives me a compliment, or I'm tasting a food that I really like, or I see a hummingbird, or an animal, or a beautiful sunset. And like, can I actually receive those things? Where do I feel them in my body? What's happening inside? And like, can I actually sit with that and let it become resourceful, right? It's not just, oh my God, let me get away from the trauma, let me heal the trauma. And I really like what you said about like not trusting your gut all the time, because I think especially for people that are in that recovery stage of, or they're looking for answers, sometimes the answers that they look for, or in desperation, like they have good intentions, but those solutions might be more damaging or re-traumatizing because they're going over their capacity. They're going like I was working with somebody last week that was sharing with me that, in their desperation to heal this lifelong anxiety and trauma from a particular accident, they decided to try brain spotting. And brain spotting's great, but the way that they were describing it to me, I said, oh, so you basically did exposure therapy on yourself. And that's the opposite of what we're talking about, right? Like, let's not dive into the middle of the trauma. Let's start on the edge in a way that's manageable and resource ourselves along the way. And then as that goes, then we can move closer and closer to the actual trauma itself. But exposure therapy isn't doing anything to help that. In fact, it might be overwhelming us, right? So when I explained that to them, they were like, oh yeah, that makes so much sense. And then they asked the exact same thing that you just said. They just said, do you think that people can actually change? Like that their nervous systems can change, that we can change these patterns? And I'm like, absolutely. Yeah. It might take a different amount of time based on your experiences. Everybody's going to go through their own journey, but we're absolutely changing all the time.
It's so true. And this is something where we live with the concept of, it's very difficult to get out of the automotive. I'm a Buick, and I need a oil change, or so. I need my starter isn't working. So and even in much of in the breathwork world, you see a lot of that kind of phrasing. We're going to reset our nervous system. We're going to restart this or that. And while there are certainly things you can do to interrupt, thought patterns and things like that. There's certain things you can do to interrupt in the immediate term. It's a journey. It's a lifelong thing that you're always going to have this partnership. We can't get away from it. And you're going to have sensations. And most of life, everything has a sensation to it, right? Oftentimes we want to see ourselves, life as an intellectual exercise. It's like it's all just, and I remember there was research that came out, and I referenced it in my book. It was showing the physical locations of emotions, and so they said, okay, so think about something that makes you angry, or so think about something that makes you jealous, or envy, or guilt, and all these things. And they showed everyone, hey, we actually do. And when I saw that, I was like, a lot of times these are things that you already know, but sometimes you just have to have them shown to you. It's like, oh yeah, what is that? Right? So why is it that every time I think about anything there, and it's not going to be a simple, I feel a singular emotion. Normally it's just a splattering of emotions, right? And it's coloring our lived experience. And they're complex, they're not organized, they are difficult to decipher. And so oftentimes because of that, it's just challenging and we just want to shut it off and we don't want to experience it, right? So we'll find ways to ignore those things and they don't go away because a part of you is really saying, hey, we've got to do something about this. And so much of my work is informed by the work of Dr. Cynthia Price, who is a research psychologist, and she's developed a method that is called mindful awareness of body-oriented therapy. And so MABT for short. And if you buy the book, so in the book there's a website you can go to that's in there for all the book extras, and I have a link to all of the research she's done. And I was just fascinated whenever I found out about her work because I was like, well, wait a minute, what she's doing is. So in breath work, a lot of times we'll say we're going to start with an intention. So you bring something up, you have an emotional attachment to it, you start to feel something, and then you do breath work, right? And so unknowingly, a lot of us are bringing up some kind of a physiological sensation that corresponds to an emotional response which we have about something we would like to change about our life, right? And that breath work helps us to feel more safe to feel that. Well, her form of therapy is just sustained interoceptive awareness in a place, and it's incredibly profound. And I've practiced it. I train with her, and it's just really profound what's already there. And we're at this cusp. When you say embodiment, it's so important that we remember that you don't stop at your neck, right? Every part of us there's 37.2 trillion cells, and they're all working together. And it's not like it's just like I'm going to experience my intellectual thoughts and the rest of it is just noise. It's all there for a reason. And it's something that we ignore to our detriment, you know? And so with breath work, one of the ways breath work can help us to become more observant of our sensations is in some sessions. So later on in the book, you'll read about the awareness exercise. Some sessions just are there to take some of the scariness out of sustaining that interoceptive awareness, to say, I'm going to feel for a while and I'm going to sit with this. And in some ways, the breath is there to help me feel a little bit safer, and so that I can focus in on that feeling for half hour, 45 minutes to an hour sometimes, and just really be with it because it's there for a reason. And oftentimes it's not as scary as we have made it out to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the part in the book where you talked about like specifically and intentionally sort of activating yourself, like pretending as if a bear was chasing you and then observing what was happening, because we do make meaning. Like that's part of being a human being, right? Is we make meaning out of sensations, out of memories, out of everything. And then those meanings get kind of static if we're not aware of them. So, you know, this is what happens when I'm activated, when my nervous system is coming online to protect me. It's not wrong. It's not dangerous in most cases, right? But this is what, you know, it reminded me of, you know, with psychedelic work sometimes, like sort of one of the ways that you can resource yourself if things are getting overwhelming is reminding yourself and maybe saying over and over and over, I took a medicine and the medicine is working.
Yeah.
Right? So in the same way, it's like I had somebody the other day, for instance, like I was doing some oxygen advantage type work with them and, you know, getting them used to, you know, the air hunger. And I could see that they were like starting to panic a little bit as they were feeling this air hunger. And I said, look, you can just tell yourself, I'm breathing in a particular way. This is the effect of that breath, and just watch it, right? We don't have to be afraid of the sensations that we're feeling. We're especially when we're doing something intentional, right?
Absolutely.
This is what I'm doing. And this is this is the phrase that I spoke, and this is the way it's being received.
You got it. Exactly right. I sometimes call CO2 tolerance training, which is for those who are listening, if you're not aware of the oxygen advantage. So you're breathing slow enough, so CO2 starts to rise. Your the brain stem starts to picks up some of those things, and then some of the alarms go off.
Right.
Even though you have all the oxygen in your blood that you need. And so I often will call that kind of training couples training, right? Couples therapy for the conscious and the unconscious, because you're just saying, hey, we can tolerate a little bit more of this. And there's emotional resilience that comes from training that way for long periods of time, for regular periods of time. And so it's like, hey, listen, look, see, we're okay. And you start to trust yourself a little bit more even. So 100%.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the name of the show is The Vital Point. And I usually say that my vital point is that, we talk about so many different methods and modalities and different ways to transform your life, but that it's not sufficient just to listen to the podcast or read a book. You actually have to apply whatever it is that you're learning. And that's my vital point. Is there something in your work or something maybe that's just alive to you today that you could share as a vital point?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of saying, I'm a work in progress. And, sometimes I think we mean well. And I don't want to take anything away from whenever we say, hey, you're perfect the way you are, right? So we mean very well. But I would say that you're worth working on is maybe a better way of, it says, I'm worth working on. I wake up, there's things left to do. There's a purpose to getting up, and I'm never going to stop developing myself. So I would say that is the biggest takeaway that I like to share, is that you're very worth whatever effort you're willing to put in, and probably even more, right? So put in that effort, because you're very much worth it.
I love that. Thank you, Jesse. So in addition to The Language of Breath, which you can buy wherever you find your books, I know you got some other things happening. Could you share how people can connect with you? So
I also offer, if you would like to really do a real deep dive and get real-time training, I offer an online course. I have it's an on-demand online course at languageofbreathcollective.com. And we do week by week. We learn all the techniques. There's guided sessions. It's a really, really big deep dive into the language of breath and learning all the different ways you can use breathing and all the different ways you can use your self-awareness together. In addition to that, I also do have the Language of Breath breathwork school. So we offer a certification, and that is a deep dive in how to do what I do. So not just how to train people well and how to confidently go out there and help people through breath, but also, how to have a business doing that. There's some best practices, ethical practices, and, sometimes just the simple things like how do I do intake? How do I help a person with staying consistent, and then all those things. So those are things that I do. You can go to languageofbreathcollective.com and find out more there. In addition to that, you can find me on YouTube at Jesse Coomer, or it's a YouTube channel. And you can also find me on Instagram at Jesse Coomer Breath.
Awesome. And we'll put all those on the show page as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Well, Jesse, thank you so much for being here and sharing about the language of breath and your experience and wisdom, and for being so generous with the practices. I really like to be able to share more than just the conversation with the audience. So I really appreciate your generosity with that.
It's been my pleasure.
Thanks so much to Jesse Coomer for being on the podcast. You can find his book, The Language of Breath, wherever you buy books. You can find him on Instagram at Jesse Coomer Breath, or you could go to jessecoomer.com for all of his links, books, courses, certification, events, all the fun stuff. So thanks again to Jesse for such an amazing podcast. And thank you in the audience for waiting for it. I know I've been sort of teasing this one for a while. Some of it was just getting the editing done so that it wasn't a hot pile of technical mess, which it sort of was when we recorded it. And you're probably listening thinking, man, it sounded great. So yes, I did do a lot of work to get it to that point. If you're enjoying the show, please leave us a review, follow on whatever platform you're consuming the podcast on. Hey, share it with a friend. That's a great way to grow our community of alchemists and practitioners. And if you're ready to dive deeper into integration, breathwork, meditation, come find us on the school site, school.com/Blue Magic Alchemy, or reach out to me directly, Blue Magic Alchemy, wherever you find it on the web. And I'm here to support you. So remember, it's not about the method you choose or the pace at which you travel. The vital point is to consistently show up for yourself and practice. As the saying goes, it's not the destination, but the journey that truly matters. And I'm here to support you on your pathway to integration and wholeness. Please don't hesitate to reach out, to connect, share your journey. What you thought of this episode? I'm here. I'm just an email, DM, or review away. Let's journey, grow, and transform together. Thanks again for tuning in. Until the next episode, keep exploring, keep growing, and above all, keep practicing, because that's the vital point.